Welcome to spooky Southcoast.
Look, I know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
AM 1420, WBSM presents Spooky Southcoast with your hosts, Tim Weisberg and Matt Costa.
Good evening and welcome to Spooky Southcoast. Tim Weisberg here along with science advisor Matt Moniz. The silent assassin Matt Costa, not with us, but eventually, someday, we hold out hope. We should take up a collection of, let's get Costa out of having to work Saturday Nights Fund. Think it would work?
It may.
I've been trying to get a collection going for years to make it so that none of us have to work, but so far has not been working. I'm also going to try and talk directly into the front of my microphone tonight, because it sounds a lot better than when I talk into the side of it over here or over here or over here.
Yeah.
Although for those of you out there listening in mono on AM, it doesn't really matter. But we are here to talk about the paranormal, as we are each and every Saturday night, and we've got a heck of a show for you tonight, because I got to tell you, I've been spending the last month or so talking about haunted objects on a semi-regular basis. And tonight, for a little while at least, we get to hear somebody else talking about haunted objects with our guests tonight, Juliet Snowden and Stiles White. They are the writers of the upcoming film The Possession, which will be released by Lionsgate Films on August 31st. Now, this movie...
These guys...
Hey, no.
Tunes will change.
I don't think they're
if
going to
they
change
develop profitable, successful drugs for treatment of multiple diseases.
I was thinking about cutting that guy off, but I just wanted to see what else he had to say.
Okay.
I actually think that, drugs will have nothing to do with the enjoyment of this film. Somebody such as yourself, Moniz, you may disagree.
It depends upon who's prescribing them.
You're from the 70s. You remember what it was like to go out and see Tommy and the Wall under the influence of...
various substances?
Yes.
Yeah.
But no, tonight we're going to be talking with the writers of The Possession. I want to find out more about the process of the whole. We see a lot of these horror movies that are coming out now, and I should also mention, by the way, we have Andrew Lake with us here in the studio. Good evening, Andy. How are you?
Howdy.
You like how I just completely overlooked you in the intro?
No, I knew you'd get to me.
I'll get to you sooner or later. But for those of you who are not horror movie fans, you may shy away from seeing some of these flicks, but we do hear in a lot of the advertising for them, based on a true story. Actually, Andy, give me your announcer voice. Say based on a true story.
Based on a true story.
There we go, much better. And so these stories, these films that are out there now, they're loosely based on true stories. And so I'm always interested in finding out the process of how they go from an actual paranormal tale that's out there and how they make that into a fictitious 90 to 120 minute movie. And so that's one of the things I want to talk about with Stiles and Juliet tonight, because The Possession is based on a true story, and it's the story of the Dybbuk box. Now, for those of you who might not patrol eBay searching for haunted objects in the midst of writing a book, such as myself and Chris Balzano have done, the Dybbuk box case is pretty... it's controversial, to say the least. Not only the immediate story that the film is based on, but some of the other stories that have popped up over the last few years regarding these spirits. And we'll get into all that coming up in a little bit. We'll let the writers of the film give us a little bit of a background on the Dybbuk boxes. But, I mean, go back to The Exorcist, okay? I mean, that was probably one of the... first films that I can remember being a horror movie that we can say based on a true story. And it's actually based on the book, which is based on a true story, where there wasn't a lot of tearing apart of the original source material. You can look at a film like The Amityville Horror, and people want to tear apart the book that the movie is based on. And the book, of course, could be a complete fabrication, depending on which side of the story you listen to. But with the Exorcist case, people pretty much left Blatty's story alone, that he had adapted the tale of the little boy in St. Louis in the 50s. It was late 50s, was it, or the early 60s? Who was apparently possessed by a demon, perhaps even the devil. And he basically just retold that story and changed it from a boy to a girl. And nobody really questions that original story too much. I mean, I have seen a lot of the true story behind the Exorcist type specials, but nobody ever calls them out on it. And so I think that that's something that we got to keep in mind when we're talking about based on a true story horror movies is, the original source material is usually questionable. So if the writers are taking a little bit of artistic license with it, well, I'm fine with that, as long as the story is good in the end. And it seems like this one is going to be pretty good. It's coming from a good pedigree. Juliet and Stiles, they have actually been writers on a few films together. They wrote Knowing and Boogeyman together, so they've got the street cred in the horror world, that's for sure. And I do want to talk to them about another project they apparently have coming up, and that's a remake of Poltergeist.
Ooh.
Yeah, and those of you who listen to the show know how I feel about Poltergeist. It's pretty perfect as far as I'm concerned.
Definitely one of the mainstays of horror, paranormal, yeah.
I guess I have to say, though, now that we live in the Blu-ray generation, there is one part of it that is not perfect, and that's the scene when the paranormal researcher goes into the bathroom after eating the steak with the maggots in it to throw up, and he starts peeling off his face. And I thought it looked pretty wooden on VHS in the 80s, and now on Blu-ray, it's pretty bad. But that aside, it's kind of the perfect film for me when it comes to some of these cases that we talk about here on the show. And then, of course, later on in the program, we'll be bringing in content director Christopher Balzano to talk with us about haunted objects. It's going to be a strange dynamic. I think I might have you guys interview Chris and I. That might be the best way to do it.
I think we can handle that.
Because otherwise it's like, so, Tim, how did you get involved in the project? Well, Tim. And then it turns into, Sybil Radio. So that's the plan for this evening. Does that work for you guys?
Yeah. No, like you were just saying, I've been thinking about that all day. There are a few films out there that were based on a true story that I knew, a good chunk of the story. And then you see the film, like Haunting in Connecticut. They went about halfway into that film and then all of a sudden just completely went Hollywood and brought up things that I never heard claimed in that case. I couldn't understand, why didn't they stick to the original case? Whether they're telling the truth or not, the story as I heard it was better than what they did with the film, in my opinion. And
what's funny about that is, every film out there that is based on reality undergoes these questions. I mean, look at Moneyball, came out last year, and people were saying, well, that wasn't really exactly how it happened. Well, but if it happened exactly how it happened, the general public wouldn't want to go out and see it. There has to be some degree of change to it, but then sometimes you get a completely bastardized story like we did with An American Haunting.
Oh, yeah, that's another great example.
They went so off the reservation on that one that it's not even recognizable. And
it was a shame because it was a good cast, it was good sets, good costumes, it was well done, and then all of a sudden just that was it.
And the source story was a pretty good story.
Yeah.
Because if you are interested in the paranormal, if you're going out to see this film for more than just a good scare on a Friday night with a date, then you're interested in the Bell Witch case because it combines a curse with a ghost with a witch. I mean, there's different aspects of the paranormal all coming together into one case, and it being the only case where a ghost was found responsible for the death of a person in a courtroom. When you bring that in.
Yeah, we had the Cornell case in Rhode Island, but that was a ghost pointing at their murderer.
Right. This is where the ghost was actually blamed for the murder.
Right.
And with the Bell Witch case, there's still room to remake that movie and do it the right way. There was a great movie that we talked about here on the show that we had the directors and the writers on here to talk about that. And that was
that little
close.
Independent film was actually very, very good. It stuck very close to the original true story.
And why Hollywood couldn't do the same thing, I don't know. But this is what we run into.
Too many 3 martini lunches.
But when you think about it, though, I mean, do we really care about other stories enough as much as we do with these paranormal stories? I mean, we get really angry when the movies don't follow along with the true story.
Well, I'm a bit of a World War II buff, and there's been a few films that made me go, "Oh, that's not how it happened. The real way was more exciting." You know.
Well, the other problem too that you run into, especially talking about World War II films and any kind of film where it's genre specific, is you have writers who may be writing the story that aren't familiar with the nuts and bolts of how it works.
Right.
And certain films, they will employ a team of researchers, and other films, they're like, well, people generally aren't going to understand how this works, so we can kind of skip over it.
Yeah.
I was watching earlier today The Great White Hype, which is a great movie about the ins and outs of boxing, and it's a very funny movie. And I'm watching it, and I'm thinking in my head, like, well, that's not how it works. That's not how the sports writers would cover it. That's not how this would happen. And then I'm thinking, most people don't realize that, though, so they can throw that out the window. And I think that we see a lot of that in paranormal movies, the haunted house movies. There's so much of what we would do in that situation that has to get thrown out the window because it's just not really that interesting.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
The debunking part is not as cool as sending in somebody who's there to confirm it. So we take it all with a grain of salt. I just want to be entertained in the end.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I remember coming on, and I'm still embarrassed about this to this day. I remember coming on these airwaves and promoting Paranormal Activity as being, the most frightening film of all time, because that's what all the reviews were coming out saying. And I didn't realize, not that I didn't like the Paranormal Activity films, but I didn't realize how much of that was the marketing people and this new way of marketing working hand in hand. They have this grassroots thing, demand it in your city, and they're ponying up to all the paranormal radio shows, and they're getting close to all the people in the field and being like, hey, put this on your Facebook wall and all this stuff. So they're making you feel like you're part of the process, and in doing that, you're willing to go overboard a little bit in your praise of the film.
Yep.
And that's I can tell you that's not the case with Lionsgate here. I mean, they vetted this show pretty well to make sure that it was worth their time to come on and discuss this film, because they know that they've got the makings of what could be
a
the
classic
next
film,
classic horror film. It's
right.
been a while since we've had one.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't really tell you the last one that I saw that I would deem worthy of the upper echelon of horror films. I think we'd have to go back to The Sixth Sense and the others, really.
Yeah. Well, the Spanish film, The Orphanage, that was
great.
very well written. Yes. Very, very beautiful film.
And if you look at all those films together, Devil's Backbone,
yes.
Pan's Labyrinth, and put them all together, I mean, they just make probably the greatest trilogy of films out there. But sooner or later, it's going to happen. I mean, they already tried to remake The Orphanage as a U.S. version.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, they're going to try and adapt them for American audiences in a way that's not quite going to work. What can we do?
Just get more popcorn.
That's the way that I see it, though, is as long as they don't expect us to keep going to the movie theaters and shelling out. Because you got to think, when you're the people that make horror movies, you got to know. Maybe we can talk to the writers about this. I don't know how much they're into the business side of things, but you got to know that your box office gate is good, but when you're a horror movie, the real money's going to be made in DVD sales and Blu-ray sales, home media, because that's where most people want to watch a horror movie. I think a lot of people have trouble going out to the theater and sitting there and watching a movie because they don't want to be scared in front of other people. And then you get also what happens with the Saw films or the Paranormal Activity films, where you go out, you watch it with a bunch of people, you have that crowd effect going on, and then when you go home, you're like, well, it wasn't really that scary. I don't know why I acted that way in the theater. So kind of goes both ways. I thought I was waiting to see if anybody made a joke there, but so we will talk with the writers Juliet, Snowden, and Stiles White about The Possession. And if you want to check it out, you can go to their website. Go to the website for the film, thepossessionmovie.com. It's also facebook.com, The Possession Movie, if you want to join up on the Facebook page there. I'll just give you a quick synopsis of the film. It's based on a true story, as we said. It's a terrifying story of how one family must unite in order to survive the wrath of an unspeakable evil. Clyde, played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, and Stephanie Brennick, played by Kira Cedric, see little cause for alarm when their youngest daughter, Em, becomes oddly obsessed with an antique wooden box she purchased at a yard sale. But as Em's behavior becomes increasingly erratic, the couple fears the presence of a malevolent force in their midst, only to discover that the box is built to contain a Dybbuk, a dislocated spirit that inhabits and ultimately devours its human host. So, I mean, just reading the synopsis alone, it sounds like something that would interest me. So, we'll see where it goes when we discuss the process of turning a true story, and how true the story is, we don't even know, into a film in just a few minutes. And then later on in the program, as I said, Chris Balzano will join us, and we'll talk about haunted objects. We want to hear your stories of haunted objects. If you've had a ghostly belonging, if you've had a cursed item, if you feel that something you own has been a possession, then you can call in during the course of the night, 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. We are also broadcasting live on Spooky TV at SpookySouthcoast.com, so you can go there and watch the live video feed and join in the chat room as well. And I haven't checked out the chat room yet so far, Moniz, but I'm sure it's pretty kicking tonight.
Yeah, we got people talking about films and stuff like that.
We had a lot of people when I posted up on Facebook and on Twitter and everything about what tonight's show was going to be about. We had a lot of people interested in the topic. So hopefully all those people that are interested in the topic go see the film, and also buy Haunted Objects, Stories of Ghosts on Your Shelf by by Christopher Balzano and Tim Weisberg. Hate to put myself first there. And you can buy that, of course, through the store at SpookySouthcoast.com. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back in just a few minutes here on Spooky South Coast.
Hey, when do you crave the refreshing taste of iced tea? Twisted Tea wants to know. After mowing the lawn, at a barbecue, on a really hot day, think about that same satisfying glass of iced tea, but with a kick. Twisted Tea is a hard iced tea that's made from beer, but tastes like real iced tea. And nothing satisfies like an ice-cold Twisted Tea. The next time you and your friends are looking for some refreshment, but you need a little kick, grab a Twisted Tea, the refreshing hard iced tea that tastes like real iced tea.
Twisted Tea Brewing Company, Cincinnati, Ohio. Drink responsibly.
Hi, Tom Bodette. You know, after 50 years, Motel 6 is still saving people more for what they travel for. And we're still leaving the light on for you. We haven't changed a bit. Well, except for all that hot internet technology stuff like online booking, our mobile website, smartphone apps, that Facebook page, tweets. All right, so maybe a few things have changed. I'm Tom Bodette for Motel 6. 50 years and the light's still on.
Come on, hit a homer, Jesse!
Let's go, guys!
Hey, did you guys know that kids who play sports earn more money when they grow up?
Of course. I knew that.
Hey, did you guys know that kids who read books have a bigger vocabulary?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Wow, jinx. Did you guys know that friendly children have more friends?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's true, I knew that. Did you guys know that winter babies are better at music?
Everyone knows that.
Oh, yeah?
Pretty obvious.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
obvious.
Oh, hey, guys, did you know that most people think they're using the right car seat for their kid, but they're not?
Huh, didn't know that.
I'm pretty sure I knew that.
I'm pretty sure you didn't.
Parents who really know it all know for sure that their child is in the right car seat at the right age and size. Visit safercar.gov/the right seat to make sure your child is protected. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Well and move a lot. 60 minutes of physical activity a day and eating well can help get your child healthy. So keep them active and eating well every day. Skip a rope Saturday, freeze tag Friday, tap dance Thursday. Whole grains Wednesday, try a veggie Tuesday. Let's move Monday, split the sweet Sunday. Eat well and move a lot. Get ideas.
Institute.
A pop quiz for parents with second grade teacher Mrs. Ridge.
Today's quiz will be a multiple choice.
Number 1. The last time I watched TV was A, last night, B, last week, or C, last month. Number 2. The last time I saw a movie was A, last night, B, last week, or C, last month. Number 3. The last time I watched pro sports was A, last night, B, last week, or C, last month. And one more question, pass or fail. The last time I visited my child's school was A, last night, B, last week, C, last month, or D, none of the above.
Know what really matters. Know about your kid's school and know about your kid. Find out 100 ways to know more, do more. Visit PTA.org or call 800-307-4PTA. A message from the Ad Council and the National PTA.
Hello.
Hey man, you up?
No.
Wake up, I need to talk to you. I think your house is haunted.
Hey, come on, it's 2:30 in the morning.
I can't sleep in here, man. I'm scared.
All right, welcome back to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with science advisor Matt Moniz and special guest co-host tonight, Andrew Lake. And we are talking about haunted objects all night long tonight. And we are very excited to do so because we have joining us on the phone Juliet Snowden and Stiles White, the husband and wife team, the writers behind the new film The Possession, coming out August 31st from Lionsgate Films. And you'll be able to see it here locally, of course, in all the theaters. I recommend going to Flagship and Wareham because that's where I will be to see it. So let's bring them on the air. Good evening, Juliet and Stiles. How are you?
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having us.
Oh, we are so excited to have you because it's one question that we've always had here on the show, and that's when it comes to horror movies that are based on a true story, you know, how much based on a true story is it? And it seems with The Possession, you've got a really good story to work with.
Yeah, there is a great story to work with. Stiles will kind of recap it for you.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing about this project is, and you're right, whenever we see the inspired by true events or the based on a true story tag on a movie trailer, we're always curious as well. In the event of The Possession, the origins of it really go back to a 2004 article that was in the LA Times that kind of drew attention to an eBay listing where a guy named Kevin Moniz had purchased an antique wine cabinet at a estate sale, and came to believe that since this cabinet had come into his possession, so to speak, weird things had started to happen to him and his family, and he basically went on eBay to sell it, and it was kind of one of these full disclosure scenarios. He outlined and detailed strange things that had happened to him. He had given it to his mom as a gift, and she had a very severe stroke the next day. I believe there were insect infestations. He was an antique dealer and had a shop in Oregon, and the room where the box where he had been keeping the antique cabinet, lights were broken and sounds were heard coming from the room. So he basically went on eBay and said, I don't know if you're a believer in these kinds of things. I think something's wrong with this antique. I want to get rid of it. And it changed hands a couple times. So it was really this Los Angeles Times article that drew attention to this really unusual story. That was kind of the jumping off point.
So now when you have that story and when you read it, are you automatically thinking in your mind, this might make a good horror movie, or is it something that, you know, it comes up in a pitch meeting or something, and then you refer back to the story as a way to put together your tale?
Well, in this instance, Sam Raimi's company, Ghost House Pictures, had optioned the story. I believe they they got the rights for the LA Times article, and then, various, real life rights of the people who had owned the box, so that they had the underlying story. In other words, to make a movie based on this real life antique that came to be known as the Dybbuk box, which in fact was kind of the working title as we were working on the film. If you go on Google and you do any internet searches for the Dybbuk box, you find all kinds of the real life incidents behind what we used as the foundation for the movie. But it was really an instance where we had worked with his company before on the movie Boogeyman, and they brought us in and said, we've got this really interesting article about this real life antique that's really out there in the world, and very strange things have happened to the various people who've owned it. So what do you guys think of what kind of movie you would want to turn it into, and really use a lot of these real life incidents that had happened as the foundation of it? And we really like the idea of a recently divorced family where the kids are going back and forth between mom and dad on the weekend, and dad is he's got a big new empty house. He's looking to buy things to fill it up, and just like in the real story, they see this box at a yard sale and just think it's something interesting and bring it home, and it begins to unravel a series of horrific events.
Now, Juliet, when you're putting together this story, though, and you're doing research on the idea of a Dybbuk, I mean, this is something that goes back, hundreds and thousands of years.
Yeah, absolutely. We spent months researching, and Stiles and I are married. One of the best ways that we did research was before we ever saw this article. We lived in the second largest Hasidic Jewish neighborhood in America for 7 years. We had an apartment in Hancock Park. So we were right in the middle of a Hasidic community, and got to view and see their customs and practices. So when the article came our way, we instantly, I don't think there was in the article any connection to Hasidim. Mm-hmm. That's one thing that we really wanted to explore more, and it was really fascinating. The more we looked into Hasidim, how they are it's a very mystical branch of Judaism, and so we were right on track with picking out that culture to explore in the movie.
Well, I was just going to say that the reason we were going down that path is for the listeners that don't know, the reason the box was dubbed, this antique wine cabinet, came to be known as the Dybbuk box, and the Dybbuk is the Jewish term for a dislocated spirit that cleaves or clings to a human host. Inside the actual wine cabinet, there was a little piece of stone tablet that had Hebrew writing on it, and on the back of the cabinet itself, there were also some Hebrew inscriptions. So it was kind of a Jewish item to begin with, and to stay true to the actual story for the movie, we really wanted the elements of Judaism to be part of the story. So, that's why we instantly thought the father, played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who's the one ultimately that has to kind of go on an investigative journey to find out what the true nature of this box is. We thought it would be fascinating for him to have to, as an outsider, enter into a very private Hasidic community to find out what he could about the nature of this box, and if there was anything he could do to stop this kind of series of horrific events that had begun to happen.
Now, I come from a Jewish heritage. My father is Jewish, and both religiously and culturally. His family observed a lot of the traditions growing up, and I know a little bit of the Hebrew inscriptions, and I'm pretty sure from the pictures I saw of the original Dybbuk box from eBay, those Jewish inscriptions on the side of the box say Manischewitz.
Okay.
It's no, just a little pull on your leg there, but no, seriously though, this is a case though that in 2004 had a lot of interest, and I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people here in this story. One thing that I do want to know, kind of your thought process and the creative process of it, is from what I understand it, Dybbuk is kind of a human spirit who has returned for whatever reason and is causing all this havoc, whereas it seems like in the film it's more of a demonic entity.
Yeah, I can kind of speak to that. I think, there's certain elements of the movie. It comes out August 31st. Mark your calendars. There's certain elements that we don't want to give away that deal with the investigation and what starts to unravel in the story. But from what we found, yes, there are older beliefs actually where the nature of Dybbuk is a little more broad than just a particular person in the past who died and had unfinished business or certain sins that have kept them as this wandering spirit. So we really wanted to kind of embrace a broader sense of the mythology of evil spirits, so to speak, and that is part of the investigation that the father character, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, begins to travel in this movie.
And Juliet, you had an interesting character that helps the father find out some of this information.
Well, when we started writing the script, we knew that we were going to have a mentor character to help our non-Jewish characters venture into this world and help them. So when Stiles and I were writing, we wanted to really break away from the traditional mentor-type character, an older man or somebody very wise in their 60s or 70s. And we knew we wanted to do a Hasidic character. And so we just had in our minds that it would be somebody like Matisyahu. We actually wrote that he wore headphones and high-top tennis shoes and was beatboxing when our Jeffrey Dean Morgan character came up to ask him for help. That was in one of our first drafts. So when we started talking with the producers about our vision for the script, we referenced Matisyahu a few times. So during the casting process, we got word that Kira Sedgwick had signed on and Jeffrey Dean Morgan had signed on, and we were like, well, what about our character Zadok, our mentor character? And they were like, oh, we got Matisyahu. And we were like, oh my gosh, that's insane. Because sometimes as an artist, you number one, you never think your movie is going to get made, and when it does, it's just amazing. But sometimes you fix in your mind what you want to happen, and it happens sometimes, and it blows your mind when it does. So
yeah, it's part of the movie magic where sometimes these ideas you have in your head they manifest in very real ways. It's part of the reason that we love being screenwriters, and we love working on movies, and especially horror movies, because for us. There's just nothing like that collective real...
Like a collective consciousness or something comes together. Yeah. And one really strange thing, too, that happened was Mattis read the script, and we didn't know any private details of Matisyahu's life, but we set our Zadok character living in Borough Park, which is in Brooklyn. It's the largest Hasidic community in America, and he had 2 sons, and Matisyahu read the script, and he lives in Borough Park and has 2 sons, and he just really felt like it was written for him, and he signed on to it.
Well, I can imagine, being a husband and wife duo that's become known for writing horror movies. I mean, do some of the neighbors kind of worry sometimes coming over your house or letting their kids come over to visit or anything like that?
Yeah, you would think that maybe our house looks like, the Munsters' house. We're at 1313 Mockingbird Lane or something. Mm-hmm. We're pretty normal people and pretty normal-looking people.
We're normal. We have an 8-year-old son. Sometimes we forget what our job is, and we're talking shop in front of our son at dinner, and my husband's saying, well, I really don't think she should die by getting that spike in her head. It just doesn't, it's just not, I just don't think it's dramatic enough. Our son's just looking at us like, oh my gosh.
Well,
I think for us, we're as husband and wife, and as screenwriters who work in horror, and we also, from that we also we were co-writers on the movie Knowing that came out in 2009 with Nicolas Cage. We're also, we write supernatural thrillers. When we first started screenwriting and working together as writing partners, we just found ourselves continuing to gravitate towards stories that had those kinds of weird and scary elements that scared us and intrigued us as kids, and from the types of TV shows and movies we would watch. And it seemed to be the types of stories we would get most excited about, and that it really ended up being where our career has taken us.
I once got a great quote. You talked about being normal people. I'm a journalist, and I did a story on a local, like a theme park type haunted house here in the south coast of Massachusetts, and these people were, talking about the bloody heads that they have on display and the severed body parts and the guy with the chainsaw, and then they looked at me and they said, "But we don't even believe in this stuff. We voted for Bush."
That's right.
So it just goes to show you, they can even be the most normal people. But you mentioned, though, discussing things at the dinner table and kind of fleshing out some of these stories. What is the process for you to create a horror movie? I mean, do you have to kind of scare each other, or have you both become desensitized to the scares?
No. We always we start with character, and we're very drama driven. I think it's why we got somebody like Kira Sedgwick to sign on to this movie, because it's really, first and foremost, it's about this family that's going through a divorce and what happens to the kids that are stuck in the middle of it. And the Dybbuk box really represents, it's a metaphor for what divorce does to families. It destroys them, and it especially destroys the children. And that with the Dybbuk box, when we read the article, we're like, okay, it's creepy. Let's try to use as many elements as we can in that. But who can this story happen to, and how can we make it mean something more than just a scary movie? So we're always approaching our work dramatically. So we sit and talk about characters for days and days and days, and that was really the jumping off point for us with the story. We were having a lot of our friends going through divorces who had kids. We were seeing what was happening to the children, and for me, I know I say I'm normal. I'm really not very normal, but I look very normal on the outside. My writing for me is a cathartic experience where I can take something I'm really upset about or something I'm really scared about and put it into my writing, and it helps me.
Well, you mentioned before, working with Kira Sedgwick on this film, and the good thing about that, in addition to having a wonderful actress in your film, is you're now like a lot closer to Kevin Bacon when you play 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon.
We're 1 degree.
But when you also, though, you mentioned that the film is produced by Sam Raimi, and I'm wondering how much input he had in the creative process, and did he ask you to write in a Bruce Campbell cameo?
No Bruce Campbell, but we worked a lot with Sam. We've met with him quite often, and I have to say, Stiles and I have been professionally writing for about 11 years. We've been together 18 years. Sam is one of the nicest people I've ever met, and there is nothing more enjoyable than pitching to Sam Raimi when he likes what you're pitching. Luckily, I haven't pitched anything he didn't like. He sits and listens to you, and he savors every word. You can see the wheels in his brain turning, visually seeing what you're talking about, and even like how he would shoot it. So it's really a pleasure, and he pushed us to be better, and that's another part of the collaborative thing that we love working on movies. Everybody kind of pushing each other to keep making things better.
And he probably kept you rolling in Maker's Mark too, right? Sorry, Stiles, you were saying?
We have not enjoyed a beverage with Mr. Raimi.
Oh, maybe at the premiere.
Maybe at the premiere.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Sam is definitely someone that getting into the horror game like we have people like Sam and Wes Craven are some of our idols in the genre, and I think what Sam brings to any project he does, whether he's directing or producing like he did on The Possession, is he brings a sense of taste and a passion for the material and the stories. And it was really, Sam is someone who, brought the director, Ole Bornedal, on this project. The Possession had known him from other things and films that Ole was doing back in Europe. And that was just the greatest choice of a director for this project. And Sam really, is great at finding the right fit of these people to write the script, this person to direct, getting certain people to sign on in the acting roles, and just being there as a support system for the directors, the writers, whoever needs him, and just, really helps, keeps an eye on the big picture.
Now, did you guys spend a lot of time on set? Because, not to give too much away of the plot, but one of the filming locations is allegedly haunted, right?
Yeah, we were actually there. We went for a week. We had pretty much finished writing, so it was more visiting the set. We took our 8-year-old son with us, so that he now believes that we actually do have a job, because we work out of the house. He's like, don't you people go to an office? What do you do all day? It was Stiles. Was it a mental institute, a closed-down mental institute where they were shooting?
It was a former hospital, and then it had become maybe a mental institute, and then it was closed down, and they use it now for locations. And I mean, you're talking about your classic, probably built in the 20s brick building, long hallways that just seemed maze-like, and you could wander off forever.
Except you don't want to. You really don't want to.
To be honest, between takes, when they would be setting up for the next shot, we would explore around a little bit. And at one point, we went into, I guess, what had been a patient's room back in the day, and there were still photographs that looked like they were from the early 70s that were taped to the wall, and little shrine and crucifixes and Virgin Marys, like they would pray there in the mornings and stuff. And that wasn't art direction for the movie we were shooting. That was literally stuff that had been left there on the wall when they closed the place down. So there was a very tangible sense of feeling like it could be a place that was haunted. Thank goodness they were only shooting during the day.
The crew was talking about having really bizarre experiences. People were seeing people, and Ole said that some fluorescent lights that weren't even turned on, just all shattered on top of them. So they were very, very weirded out by that place.
Well, that leads into my final question. We only have about 3 minutes here before we have to depart. But I want to ask you about the next project that I read, at least on IMDb, that you're working on, and that's a remake of Poltergeist.
We wrote that about 4 years ago. That is something that's from the past. Our next project is we're writing and directing a movie for Universal and Michael Bay called Ouija.
Nice.
Or Ouija,
well,
however you want to call it.
Both films sound like they'd be perfect for you to come back and discuss those more with us at a later date.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having us. It was fun.
Thanks for joining us. It's great to find out the process, and we're looking forward to seeing The Possession on August 31st.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Great.
Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
All right, that was Juliet Snowden and Stiles White, the husband and wife writers of The Possession, which is coming out on August 31st at theaters near you. So, sorry, Moniz, I didn't mean to cut you off, but we were up against the break, and I wanted to ask him about that Poltergeist thing.
Not a problem.
So, but we're going to have them back on, definitely, to talk about Poltergeist. And I didn't even realize they were working on a Ouija project.
We got an expert that we can hook them up with.
Yeah, sounds like that might be a good night for Bob Murch to come down and hang out in the studio.
You're in my head.
And, well, I don't want to be in there too long. I'll start writing horror movies if I'm up there too long. But we we are very, very honored to have them join us, because it's not every day that you can talk to people about that creative process, and we can sit here and be armchair quarterbacks about it and talk about, wow, they really bastardized that true story to make this film. But now, you get an understanding too of what goes into it. And it just sounds like, it's going to be a real creepy film. So looking forward to it. Also looking forward to coming back in the next hour with our guest and content. He's not really a guest anymore. We can't call him a guest. He's part of the spooky crew. He works here, even though he lives elsewhere. But we'll have Christopher Balzano joining us to talk about our book, Haunted Objects, Stories of Ghosts on Your Shelf, which you can purchase online now. You can get it through SpookySouthcoast.com, and you can get it through anywhere else that you buy books, Amazon, the bookstores. They're in all the local bookstores, apparently. People are telling me they're buying it and saving it for me to sign for them. And I'm like, that's great, but you got to ship it to Chris to sign his half too. So we'll be back in just a few minutes. During that time, if you want to go to SpookySouthcoast.com or LegendTrips.com, you can purchase tickets to our upcoming Haunted History Night on October 20th at the Fearing Tavern in Wareham, Massachusetts. I'm going to be there. Moniz is going to be there. Andy's going to be there. So, it's like hanging out right now tonight, only at the Fearing Tavern. And we'll have all kinds of fun stuff. Now, you guys were saying that we're going to have an opportunity for people to go into the old company store.
Yep.
Which is part of that whole little area, and they're going to have a chance to actually go in there and check out another haunted location. Not as an investigation, but at least they can go in and wander around and buy some cool stuff.
They can buy some cool stuff. The owner is going to have her chef cook up some desserts type of things for people to eat, and she's going to share her personal experiences in the place.
Great place. But let me tell you, bring lots of money with you or a credit card, because there's so much stuff in there that you're going to want to buy. All kinds of cool items. You can even get old-fashioned glass bottles of soda in there. So you want to definitely check that out. So as I said, we're coming up on the news. When we come back in hour number 2, it'll be more discussion about haunted objects. There's no Dybbuk boxes in the studio, but we've got some pretty creepy stories that we can share with you as well. So stick around for that. And also feel free to call in with your stories, 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. We'll be right back with more here on Spooky South Coast.
The station the South Coast turns to for news, sports, and weather. WBSM New Bedford, AM 1420, WBSM.
From ABC News, I'm Michael Barr. Wildfires continue to burn in the west. Lightning sparks have touched off more than 24 blazes in Northern California Saturday. The Ponderosa fire north of Sacramento forced the evacuation of a number of homes. California Fire spokesman Daniel Ballant says it has been a bad year because of dry conditions.
This year we have seen a significant increase in our fire activity. In fact, this year we've seen over 1,300 additional fires to date than we did last year.
In southwestern Idaho, a wildfire is so bad officials are worried thick smoke may slow down the evacuation of hundreds of residents. Gary Walker is with the Elmore County Sheriff's Department.
It's been difficult for them at times to see how far the fire is progressing. That's why we can't really estimate exactly how close it is to the Featherville community.
Family and friends remembered a Texas constable who was among 3 people killed in a shootout earlier this week near Texas A&M University. Mourners at Brian Bachman's funeral in College Station described him as compassionate, humble, and a dedicated public servant. Constable Buck Bonner was among the mourners.
It's sad, situation, just get killed over serving civil paper for eviction.
Dallas officials say they will resume spraying the area tomorrow night with mosquito-killing pesticide to stop the spread of the West Nile virus. Bad weather tonight shut down air operations. ABC News meteorologist Ginger Z has more on aggressive action taken to stop the virus.
Breaking in, spraying down. Our nation is in assault mode. The mission? Eliminate mosquitoes that could carry the West Nile virus. In Carrollton, Texas, they're busting into abandoned pools and cleaning them out. That way, mosquitoes can't breed in that stagnant water.
A United flight heading out of Newark Airport in New Jersey had to turn around and land after a tire blew and debris was sucked into the engine. You're listening to ABC News.
Hello, this is Bank. How can I help you?
Yeah, hi. My wife and I just had a baby, and I need to cash in my CD early.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank
Please
you.
note, early withdrawal penalties do apply. These are up to but not restricted to 50% of the CD's value. All withdrawals...
We're not sure what some banks mean when they say, how can I help you? At Ally Bank, we offer a no-penalty CD that lets you withdraw all your money after the first week of funding and keep the interest earned with no penalties. That's how Ally helps. Ally Bank. No nonsense, just people sense. Member FDIC.
Is it time for a new roof? Get your roofing job done right. Call Sears Roofing right now for a free in-home estimate. That's Sears Roofing. Not available in all areas. Installation provided by Sears authorized licensed contractors. License information available upon request. Call Sears Roofing right now. 1-888-990-2233. That's 1-888-990-2233. 1-888-990-2233. Sears.
Medicare emerged as a major issue in the race for the White House. ABC's David Curley has more on Saturday's campaigning.
In front of more than 3,000 Florida retirees, Paul Ryan hugged his 78-year-old mother, a Medicare recipient, and repeated the campaign charge that the president is taking $700 billion from Medicare.
This board of bureaucrats will not mess with my mom's health care or your mom's health care.
In New Hampshire, the president fought back too.
Their plan makes seniors pay more so they can give another tax cut to millionaires and billionaires.
As for Romney, he was fundraising several stops in his home state of Massachusetts.
Philadelphia police say they believe an off-duty officer who was shot and killed early Saturday was the victim of a robbery. Police say 40-year-old Officer Moses Walker Jr. had just finished his shift when he was shot several times just blocks from his precinct house. A Florida judge is recommending that school officials reinstate a Kissimmee teacher accused of using hot sauce to discipline an autistic student. The teacher says she soaked the child's crayons with the sauce to keep the boy from eating them. Thomas Egan is the attorney for the teacher, Lillian Gomez.
I think she made a bad judgment in the way she went about it, but her purpose was good.
Meanwhile, this parent can't believe the judge sided with the teacher.
That's ridiculous. Maybe she shouldn't work with children. Maybe she should find another career.
This is ABC News.
Is it time for a new roof? Get your roofing job done right. Call Sears Roofing right now for a free in-home estimate. That's Sears Roofing. Not available in all areas. Installation provided by Sears authorized licensed contractors. License information available upon request. Call Sears Roofing right now. 1-888-990-2233. That's 1-888-990-2233. 1-888-990-2233. Sears.
Michael Barr, ABC News.
Welcome to the Maya and Miguel Challenge. Meet Maya and the gang.
Oh, hi, I'm Maya.
Maya and her friends want you to get up and play, because it's always more fun to be active.
There's mountain biking, boating and fishing, mountain climbing and spelunking. Let's get started.
Get ready to take the Maya and Miguel Challenge.
Let's see.
Just go to letsmove.gov and look for Maya and Miguel. You'll find tons of fun activities that'll help keep you healthy and active. Muy activo. You can also check out healthy recipes to try with your family, play cool games, and get free downloads. So come hang out with Maya, Miguel, and the whole gang.
Go!
Remember, whether you play sports, run, dance, or jump in place, just get up and play at least an hour a day. And don't forget, eat healthy to be your best. Maya and Miguel will show you how at letsmove.gov. That's letsmove.gov. A message from the Ad Council and the Department of Health and Human Services.
Radio, a medium that has been pruned, honed, trimmed, winnowed, chiseled, bonsai'd, and deposited here today, ready to be.
Welcome to Health Talk, a weekly program on health, medicine, and nutrition, featuring the latest information on both conventional and alternative therapies. Your host, Dr. Ronald Hoffman, MD, is a graduate of Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and he's trained in internal medicine as well as alternative medical practices. Now, here's your host, Dr. Ronald Hoffman.
Welcome to another hour of the weekend edition of Health Talk. We've got lots of phone calls, lots more information. Among the stories coming up next, we're going to take a look at the power of prayer for healing serious disease, a new study. All
Look, I know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
AM 1420, WBSM presents Spooky South Coast with your hosts, Tim Weisberg and Matt Costa.
Welcome back. Hour number 2 of Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with science advisor Matt Moniz, and Andrew Lake of Greenville Paranormal Research is here with us. And also, he's part of the Spooky Crew. And we also have joining us another part of the Spooky Crew, our content director, our guiding light, our source for all things paranormal news, and just each and every one of our own personal best friend. Christopher Balzano is joining us. What's up, Chris? What's going on?
I don't think I can live up to that billing. Oh, my word.
I think each time we have you on, I'm just going to get more and more extravagant in my praise for you. Makes up for all the shit that I say about you on the off the air. I just dropped an S-bomb on the radio.
That's so funny, because the first thing I was going to say is, seeing that we're on the flagship, I'm going to try to watch my language, and you swear.
That's a reference to an upcoming guest that we have.
Okay.
I have not read a single one of them yet in the book, by the way. I've read a few other words, but not her favorite word that night.
No, definitely not, and I don't think it is, because I have my my reservations over whether or not she wrote that. But
well, no, they have a team of people that help clean that stuff up.
I think it was in collaboration, at least with Joanne, if nothing else. But it's actually kind of a good book. I was a little bit thrown off.
Everybody's looking at us like, what the heck are you talking about? We're going to have joining us. Do we have a date set yet?
No, we don't. We don't. We're working it out right now, but we're hoping in October. You know what I'm saying? It's a really good Halloween type show to have. So.
Just not the 20th, because we're busy that night.
Yeah, whatever. Maybe I'll just
while we're
do it myself.
While we're on that subject, we should say that next Saturday night, Spooky South Coast will not be broadcasting here on WBSM, because we'll be at the Dead of Summer event at the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast. However, Chris is going to attempt to run a show on Spooky TV, which, if our last episode of Spooky Crossroads is any indication, should work out pretty well.
Yeah, and hopefully it's Marla Brooks, and so it's a really good show to have, because I'm going to get to some nuts and bolts of witchcraft, and Marla's the person to ask, and so, we're hoping that, we're not going to be talking about curses or haunted objects or, the case that shall not be named, that everything will go smoothly.
Well, the other good part about that is if you have all kinds of technical issues and things with the internet, Marla's used to that.
Exactly. Maybe she can do an on-the-fly blessing for us.
Yeah, she knows. I mean, she hosts a talk show herself, so she knows what it's all about.
Oh, yeah, that technical stuff, too. Yeah, that too.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
I just meant, like, they're used to having to go up against what technology can provide, and sometimes we have to do that as well.
And boy, do we work it out.
More or less. So I heard you wrote a book.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's funny. The more I talk about it, because we were so close to it as we were writing it, and how the way that it came to be, which is kind of this mixture of folklore and famous cases and real cases, and then our personal experiences. It very, I hate to use this term, but very organically kind of came together. And then the more that I've talked about it with people, the more I'm excited, because they're getting excited because they dig that. And so, yeah, I'm very interested, and I'm very excited by the reception that it's been getting, and how more and more people are now coming forward and sharing stories, but then also trying to want to know, well, why is this kind of stuff out there? Why does it exist? What is the basis of it? So, talking about both kind of things rocks in my world, so I love it.
And, of course, we had Juliet, Snowden, and Stiles White on in the first hour talking about the new film, The Possession, and I think that's only going to help increase the discussion more on haunted objects and cursed items and possessed possessions.
Yeah, and there's like you guys were discussing, the difference between, fact and reality, and it's based on a true story and those kinds of things, and And sometimes it takes the dramatized, sensational case or example of the case, a movie, a book, that might be a little bit from the truth to start the debate and to start the discussion. So, I'm all about that.
Well, we have with us here in the studio, we have Matt Moniz and Andy Lake, as you can see on Spooky TV at SpookySouthcoast.com. But I'm thinking, rather than interview ourselves, it might be best if we just have them kind of lead the discussion a little bit on haunted objects, stories of ghosts on your shelf.
Hey, that rocks to me. Those are two of my favorite paranormal people in the world, so...
And while I'm sure neither one of them has read the book yet, that hasn't stopped the countless other radio hosts who have asked us about it.
Well, that's only because I haven't gotten a copy yet.
Yeah, I don't have any to give you yet either. And I just realized, oh crap, I was supposed to get some before dead of summer. So
there are too many cameras at Barnes & Noble, so I couldn't get my own copy yet.
So,
and I'm all about that because when they pay to replace it, we still get money for that. So steal them if you want, buy them if you can.
It's like that. What was it? System of a Down? Steal this album. Abby Hoffman, steal this movie. It's like Chris and Tim, steal this book.
That's our new ad campaign. Actually, we're reopening Pair Relations, and we're starting with the Steal This Book campaign.
That's you say that in jest, but I guess it's not a joke. I guess we really are starting Pair Relations back up.
We might be, and I can say that because my wife's not listening to this broadcast and won't. But there definitely seems to be a call out there for it. So don't be surprised if Pair Relations gets its own little slide on the, Spooky South Coast front page banner.
I just can't believe that your soul has grown back enough after it got sucked out the first time that Pair Relations was open.
Well, I think if it's run the right way, and I think if we have a tight mission statement about what we want, that people are out there in the paranormal world that are not being heard. And you and I have talked about this a lot. This whole kind of idea of, the loudest, flashiest thing gets the microphone and the content. People sometimes don't. So this is I'm looking to it as a way to bring content back to the forefront.
All right. Well,
obviously, none of our material will ever be represented by us because it has no content.
Well, I was going to say we're still though in the mode of just shamelessly self-promoting ourselves. So
yeah, I mean, I've become a real expert in thinking that what I'm doing is really good for the past couple months. So
glad somebody believes it. All right, well let's turn things over to Matt and Andy, and we'll kind of let them lead the discussion, and I'll just sit here and act like I'm an in-studio guest. Hold on, ready? I'm really happy to be here. Talk closer.
Yeah, talk a little closer.
Closer.
There you go.
Closer to the microphone. Oh, on this side, right? No. Okay. All right. Here I am.
We live? Are we live?
Yeah. You guys
now,
are live.
people can see us on these cameras, right?
Yes, they can.
Oh man, I wish I had known that.
They can also hear you over the airwaves.
Oh, okay. Well, we're very excited. This is our first time in a real radio station. So.
All righty. Now, what was your main inspiration for writing the book?
Money.
Okay, Mr. Balzano.
I was looking to spend more time with Tim.
I'm sorry, that was the right answer. I should have said I was really looking for a project that Chris and I could work on together that wasn't Spooky South Coast. No, sorry, go ahead, Chris. You can.
Oh no, go ahead, Tim.
Well, they approached you first about it.
Right. I mean, it was kind of a very long story coming, and it basically was, they wanted, like most of my books, they wanted Jeff to do it, and he was like, no, it's a little below me, but Balzano's perfect for it. And it was kind of a mad crunch for time for me when they originally offered it. And I'm like, I would love to bring another author in. And Tim and I had been looking to work on something, and I was like, okay, here we go. And it's really kind of weird because I think if it had gone a traditional route, it would have been a more traditional book. But it seemed to have and publishing stories are really boring for people who are into ghosts, but this is kind of connected. It just had this like stop and go. And then the person who approached us left the company, and there was all these weird things that even were the start of it, which have kind of continued throughout this entire process. But I think that us putting it down, picking it back up, us putting it down, picking it back up, and then all of a sudden there's a mad rush, really made us reevaluate, like I was saying at the beginning, how we were going to approach the book. And then that kind of led to this, I think, a very unique book in that it celebrates those three different aspects, like famous cases, personal cases, and then a lot of ones that are more into the realm of folklore. So while it's a really boring story, I think that it kind of made for a much better book in the end.
Well, we did decide, too, that we wanted to put a lot of focus on stories people hadn't heard, because there's many books out there that are chock full of ghost stories. And even though might be the first time they're being collected in a book of haunted object stories, people have heard about Robert the Doll. People have heard about Annabelle the Doll. People have heard about James Dean's car. Some of these things that we've covered here on the show and in other media in the past, and we wanted to have some of those stories that people had never heard before and try to have them told from people who aren't in the paranormal field. And I think we got a good mix kind of right down the middle of people who don't know about this stuff and have these real life experiences, and people who seek out the paranormal, and this just happened to be in the course of their work.
And even more than that, there was a kind of realization that haunted items are not always what you think they are, and that some of the most compelling stories we were able to find were ones that weren't doll stories or haunted toy stories, or they weren't haunted cabinet stories, but they were really like odd things such as birth certificates and
the haunted cheese grater or something like that.
Well, we have a haunted soap dish.
Yeah, butter dish.
Butter dish.
I'm sorry, butter dish. So I mean, it actually ended up being, and I think that's kind of eerie because, if all of a sudden anything in your house can have a ghost attached to it, or become the subject of, or the object of a possession or a curse, that kind of really means everything in your house is open game, and that's kind of unsettling.
So what did you guys find was the most common haunted items or possessed items or cursed items? Because there's a slight difference in those three. So what did you find the most? Possessed, cursed, or haunted items?
I mean, I think it was far and away haunted items, and usually haunted by the spirits that people knew. It was more, deceased family members who would attach themselves to either something that they loved or something that they knew that the person still living would know was a reflection of them. I think cursed items were kind of the hardest thing to find more than anything, right, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, because, those were, the basic difference between, at least as I see it, the basic difference between a haunted item and a cursed item would be a haunted item seems to have some kind of, the former living has, or in some cases still living, has some kind of connection to the object. And so the activity that's observed by people revolves around that object, whereas a cursed item seems to be it enters the house and then wacky things happen. And so it's hard oftentimes to nail down what is the cursed item, because it's a long time to figure out that, wait a minute, all this stuff is really starting to happen. Like, start connecting those dots as oftentimes as a not an individual but as a family starts to realize these kinds of things. And then it's like, as you go backwards, trying to figure out the genesis of this, like the origin, when did things seem to go badly? And then all of a sudden you realize it was something very, very, very innocent at the beginning, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, this has started this whole series of events.
Sort of like the Hope Diamond?
So, well, yes, which is a great example of a cursed object. And it's one of those things where, obviously if there's a Hope Diamond, that's that's a pretty big thing to do it, as opposed to, a doll that's in your house, or a say, for example, a cardboard piece of cardboard with, the Our Father written in blood. So those are things you normally wouldn't think of as being, bringing evil things into your house.
Well, and that's the other problem too with cursed items is a lot of times when people are placing a curse, they place it on the person more often than on an item. So while people may feel like an item might have been the beginnings of this curse, in reality it could just be on them. So even when they get rid of that item, they're still cursed. So it's one of those tricky things where it's You can't really be sure unless you know for a fact that it was placed directly on the item. And I know one of the stories that I shared, and it was something that at least we knew that it was a direct curse placed on an item. So those were the kind of stories we were looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you're getting into kind of the black arts, which would kind of be needed to have a curse, even if it's not necessarily a practitioner, but someone whose intent gets into those same kind of energies. The human person, and Tim and I have never really discussed this, so it would be interesting to have his thoughts on this, but the person themselves is a difficult object to attack. Whether we have personal strength or we have auras, if you believe in that kind of thing, there are kind of like ingrained defenses that people have. But if you can put that curse on an object and slide that object into the person's life so it can start to kind of infect the environment, it seems to be a much more powerful thing.
It's almost like a Trojan horse for the curse.
Exactly, and usually it's not something that's necessarily thought of as pleasant. You can be very mundane and very normal, and then bad things start to happen. And breaking down those kind of that strength and breaking down those protections that people kind of just have naturally.
Right. Now,
I love turning the tables on them here.
I just gotta ask you guys, if you guys were ever to investigate a case of a haunted or possessed item, would you recommend the item be destroyed, or would you pull a John Zaffis and tell the people you should take this valuable antique out of the house and put it somewhere safe?
I'll take it.
Yeah,
that's my point of view. I don't want to have it in the house because I have a family, but I have a nice shed I can keep it in for further study.
I'm a firm believer that destroying the object somehow releases things. I used to.
So you want to destroy the cage that the tiger's in?
Yeah. And I'm not really sure if I can verbalize why scientifically. Although I guess I could do that, but in terms of at least in folklore and other kinds of approaches to it, I used to. My dorm used to be Emerson College, and supposedly the people who created it put spells on physical parts of the building. And I remember just thinking, especially when I heard that it was being gutted out to be turned into condos, what kind of stuff are they releasing? And I haven't heard any stories about it, but I remember that being a very firm idea in my head and being somewhat frightened by the idea of well, wait a minute, they're gutting this place out. What if they're releasing those spirits? And those would be much more of thought forms and things like that, rather than spirits of people who were living. But I remember being very frightened by that. So I really say I'm really of the church of give it to Tim, because don't destroy it, because only bad things can happen if you do.
But I will say, if the item does have value, maybe the best thing to do is to sell it. Just sell it, because if you know that it has value, it's worth something, sell it, pass it on to somebody else. It's up to you if you want to give them kind of that disclaimer with it, but there is a lot of speculation that certain people in the paranormal field who collect haunted items tend to only gravitate toward taking the ones home with them that have value, thereby increasing the net worth of their private collection. So just to avoid that whole circumstance, you want to get rid of it. Why not you get the money? I mean, some people feel like if you profit off of it, then you're just as cursed as if you have the object in your own possession. But take that chance. It's better to take that chance with $50 in your pocket than with a haunted object in your closet.
So I think a lot of the cases that we cover in the book that are of haunted items, most of them had some kind of origin to them and some kind of backstory where, like a Rubik's Cube, it had to be solved. And for many of them, solving that mystery behind it seemed to diffuse the haunting itself. And so not many people were giving up their haunted items because they were they kind of found a balance with them, and they found some kind of harmony with it, as opposed to, like the possessed items or the cursed items that we had talked about before.
And two, one of the other things about these haunted items that we write about is a lot of them are somebody that the person knew, or was very close to or a family member, so they wouldn't want to get rid of that item. They almost want to keep that spirit around. Some of them were coming to them in times of distress. So to think that if you ever had another bad day again, great grandpa could come back and calm your fears one more time, then you'd want to hold on to the item.
Yeah, I can see that. Sure.
And I think the one story we have where the person destroyed the item worked out well. The haunting completely stopped. So that was a case where it was a genuine scary haunting. It was not someone they knew. It was someone who was trying to get them to. It was basically, we said cabinets earlier. It was a metal cabinet, but inside the metal cabinet was a copy of the person who had died's birth certificate. And the woman who had bought the cabinet at a yard sale had a lot of really bad experiences. And she tried. She did her best, private detective to try to figure out a way to get this birth certificate back into the hands of the family. And when it failed, the activity that was going on in her house was just way too intense. And so her and her husband ended up burning it. And the haunting stopped for her. So it seemed like, in that case at least, that the power was actually coming from, in some way, the birth certificate itself. And so when it was destroyed, it was no longer kind of a gateway for the spirit to come and visit them.
Well, I will say, if anybody has any stories that they want to share, I'm going to jump in and do host job for a second. If anybody has any stories that they want to share of an item that they have that they believe had been cursed, possessed, or haunted, you can give us a call, 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. And that's the best way to get us, because you can share it with everybody here. But you can also email us, spookycrew@spookysouthcoast.com, or jump in the chat room at spookysouthcoast.com. And hopefully, I know Dave's in the chat room. Maybe we can get him to call in and talk a little bit about the dress at Stone's. And I don't know if John Brightman is in the chat room, but he could share the story of the cursed item that he shared with us for the book. And of course, we have the Haitian masks that Jeanette Osborne told us about. I mean, there's so many stories that when you're reading this book, these stories are connected to Spooky South Coast too, because these people trusted us enough to share their own personal experiences and share these stories with us, including Claire the doll, which we had here in the studio, right where you're sitting, Andy. And and she was cool to hang out with us hang out with me for a couple of weeks. And when you can actually take the item and hold it in your hands and apply that to the story. Here I am holding this doll that caused a younger Jill so much fear and grief when she was younger, and you're looking at it and you just don't understand how something like this can have that kind of power. But it made me think that even if it wasn't for the fact that it was haunted, even if, and I don't think it's the case, but if it was all in Jill's mind, this haunting, just to look at that object and to realize the power that it can have over somebody when it's something that you would never even think about. And then you start thinking back to your own childhood growing up and the things that scared you, and you start to wonder if they had that power.
Trilogy of Terror with Karen Black, the little doll in that.
See?
That absolutely
That's the
scared
second
the
interview I've done
fertilizer
where
out
that
of
came
me.
up. That was
That is hilarious.
I didn't even want my G.I. Joes in my bedroom with me after that movie.
Chris is familiar with the film, but he got stumped on another show being asked about that.
That's funny.
Oh.
Meanwhile, I got a weird science question. So.
It's way too easy for it. The other part of that is that in talking with, not only just doing promotions, but in talking with people who have read the book and stuff like that, they want to talk about some of those more sensational stories, but there are also some really good, quick little tidbitty ones that are in there that we're not probably giving as much press because they're not the kind of foundations of the book, but they're the little quick stories, because so much of the paranormal is the one-time event, or is the thing that you don't realize until after it's over that, wait a minute, that wasn't supposed to happen. And so there's really kind of and those act as almost kind of like pit stops in the book. We're dealing with these very heavy cases, a lot of which are very scary and frightening, and then you'll get this other one that's just really small and quick, and yet you're like left shaking your head about it. So it's really interesting to kind of do those little snapshots too.
Now, both of you guys have been friends for years, and you're both written books on your own. How hard?
Well, Tim wrote a book. It should be singular.
Okay.
And Chris wrote a book and just kept recycling it under different titles.
Okay.
Oh, I can't even make that joke with you because all your work is so diverse from one to the other.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
I don't really write them. But go ahead, Matthew. I'm sorry.
My question being, what was the hardest part of writing with each other, and what were the easiest parts?
In other words, who was the millstone in the project?
You know, we talk about this quite a bit, but we're amazed at how smoothly it worked out. I mean, we had conversations going into this where we were really concerned about, okay, well, if you write this, and then I'll take it, and I'll give it a once over, and whose voice should we use? What tone should we take? We had a lot of discussion about that. I mean, I remember, I don't know how you felt about it, Chris, but after we had the biggest phone conversation about all that, I kind of hung up the phone and started thinking to myself, gee, maybe this is not going to work out this way. Maybe we're too set in our styles as writers to be able to give some of that up to collaborate, but that's not how it worked out at all.
No, and I think I was probably even more hesitant than you were because I'm a jerk. And when I'm writing, I'm very particular and very peculiar sometimes in the way that I want things to go, and and things stump me oftentimes, and I have to stop because I'm not getting this right, and so I really take a lot of pride in my craft, which is, you've read some of the books, you might take pride in my crap, but still. And it was like, another person and someone who's my friend, and I've got to not get angry with them when they and no, this isn't what I want. And my name's first, so I'm the best.
Yeah, we did.
And it ended up not happening.
We did have to set a ground rule from the beginning of nothing personal. I mean, that's something that we went into it saying, nothing, no matter what happens, you can't take it personally. But it didn't work out like that. I mean, the first chapter that I sent over to him that I had finished up, and he had sent me some stuff that he had finished up, and we're reading it, we're like, you wrote it exactly the way that I was writing mine, and it worked.
So,
right.
So
the first chapter you sent over was basically a rewriting of a story that I wrote in Ghost of the Bridgewater Triangle, but still.
Yeah, but had I actually read that, you could have accused me of plagiarism. But
I just told him from Edward Lodi, so it was perfectly fine.
Let me just say, I try to keep the spines in your book as pristine as possible for their collectible value.
And I think part of that had to do with the subject matter. So it wasn't like necessarily there was a psychic bond. I think a lot of it, going into it, seeing ourselves as not investigators, and as part interviewer, reporter, searching for the truth, but more over storytellers. And so I think that when we were kind of approaching it from that angle, those other good parts of us kind of filtered in the way they should with any writer who's writing about something that they love. I think that a lot of it came from, we were both kind of determined to tell the people who had these experiences stories, even if those were us, even if those were our stories. And so I think that had a lot to do with the smoothing over of it. And we've had a lot of debates and we've had a lot of discussions with people, and even kind of hints at what we were talking about tonight, whether things when you say based on a true story, I think that this book is based on a true story, and oftentimes it's our angle on it, or it's our heart, it's our finding the heart of the haunting, as I've often said. But I think that, it's impossible to tell the exact story, because when people tell you the story, it automatically takes a narrative. It automatically has a plot to it, because you're looking at it backwards. And I think that when we allowed that to happen, that's part of the reason why just kind of naturally the stories came together and we were able to work together.
That was the hardest part for me, was being able to separate the journalist, and which is funny because in my job I don't really consider myself a journalist. I'm not really a journalist. I'm not one of these guys that's going to go up there, after as your house is burning down, and stick a microphone in your face and ask questions about it. But I had to separate the journalist side of me, and I had to separate the investigator side of me, and not try to prove or disprove these stories, and just tell the story. And at first I was very nervous about that, because I was like, okay, if
you went from a chronicler, from a journalist to a chronicler.
Right, and when you're doing that, you're worried about giving up some of your own credibility. in sharing some of these stories, because some of them are very fantastical. So you're like, if I tell this story, then are people going to look at me differently because the way? And then once we got kind of over that hump, like, it became immensely enjoyable to be able to tell these stories and to be able to, turn a phrase in regard to the way that you're sharing this person's experiences. They're telling you what happened and you're trying to put some sort of prose to it, and then, even though you're not really supposed to give somebody a view of the story before it's published and say, what do you think? But to say kind of, does this accurately reflect the way that you felt at the time? And to have them say yes. It's something new to do as a writer, to learn how to convey other people's emotions instead of your own.
Okay, so you went from basically clinical to more of a lyrical type of writing, where you were more free to augment with your own feelings rather than just take down the basic facts, which you would normally do in your journalistic phase.
What you see as a result of that is, even though we're displaying for you each individual tree, we never do lose sight of the forest throughout the course of the book.
And I think part of what happens is that we're able to convey, when someone doesn't get the story right, or there's a part of it that doesn't make sense or line up, so much of that has to do not with them intentionally telling you a lie, but it has to do with their own kind of sense of not understanding what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think one of the things that we unintentionally set out to do, but what we did do, is we captured that confusion and kind of celebrated that confusion, because so many of the experiences were, at least on my end, were brought to me in terms of, hey, what the heck is going on here? I don't get it. Or this is something that happened in my life and it was very weird. Let me tell you about it. And it was their way of trying to understand what had happened. And so that, you can't, when you're telling that story, you're not confronting them about, the mistakes or the inconsistencies, but you're rather kind of presenting them as, this person didn't understand this, or they were confused, or according to, or when they thought back on it later, and you're presenting it with those kind of built-in and kind of like, maybe this isn't true, this is from their, perception. So when you celebrate that as part of the confusion of what was going on to them, I think it makes for a really interesting take on the paranormal. So it's not that straightforward, we went to a haunted house and here's what happened, but here's what was going on in my life. I didn't get it. It was a Tuesday. Well, wait a minute, you just said it was the weekend. Oh, yeah, wait a minute. No, that was another part of it that happened. And you're kind of able to say, oftentimes, wow, this makes it in some ways more believable because it's not rehearsed. It's more of kind of like they're venting, and from that vent comes the story.
Okay. Now, what did you use as a selection process for what items you included and which ones you didn't? In other words, did you basically censor yourselves saying, we're not going to take any objects that deal with this or that? Do you understand the question?
Yeah, and that's actually, I've been dying for someone to ask me that question, really, and no one has.
Well, they have now.
Because, I had in my mind, going into it, what I thought a haunted item story should be, a haunted object story should be. And I was very particular that I didn't want 27 people to tell me their Robert the Doll experiences, for example, and think that it was going to be a chapter. I also didn't want ones that necessarily, I didn't want too many stories that revolved around famous priests. That we have a few things that, touch upon Stone's Tavern or Lizzie Borden, but I didn't personally want it to be too heavy with landmark cases. And I also didn't want it, originally I didn't want it to be something, I wanted it to be more personal, so I didn't want it to be something where, something very weird happened when I touched Pope's feet, his shoes. And what I found is that those stories, as people were telling them to me, that touched upon those things I originally pushed out, were just as interesting because they were personal. And so it was kind of this, when we talked about the case that shall not be mentioned, that was something that I had no desire whatsoever to touch, and yet because the personal side of it, especially its connection to other things we've been working on, then ultimately a personal connection to me, I it was like, wow, well, this has to be included. This is like 3 or 4 different haunted items have fallen to the path of this case. And so, and I also wanted the haunted items to be the focus of whatever was going on. But once again, I found that, oftentimes it's when we remove these things from places that are notoriously haunted, or even just knowingly haunted by a small group of people, that bad things happen. So the best answer to that is yes, I was totally biased going in, and then the stories themselves completely changed my focus.
Okay. All right. Now, which items in the whole book did you find the most compelling? Which had, in your opinion, the most compelling? I'll start with you, Chris.
Wow. Taking my personal experiences aside, I think one of the, although I guess it is a personal experience, but one of the more interesting stories that really kind of drew me in, as I was telling it, and as it was kind of unfolding as I'm writing it, was a case that involved your good friend, Nancy Panetta in Florida, who had gone, once again, this kind of breaks the rules I initially had. She had gone to a paranormal location, and in that location, a book called The Lady of the Lake kept finding its way into the investigation. She was investigating this haunted house. It was originally on her nightstand, and then as she was investigating over the course of the night, it kept appearing in weird places. They would completely switch rooms, and the book would appear. And then it kind of followed her home. Somehow it got into her bag, and when she got home, she realized that she had the book. So it was this really kind of, destiny, which is supposed to have this book. And what really kind of draws me in, that I think is kind of the next level of the paranormal, is, I own that same exact book. And it's not like it's, it's not like it's the Hunger Games. It's, a weird, obscure book that we both have the same edition, which was published over 120 years ago. Mine's completely normal. Hers is not. Her and I have had these really odd chance encounters and all these different ways we've kind of come in and out of each other's life over the past couple of years. And this book was like this other link. And the more we talked about the book, the more we realized there were these other paranormal links between us. And so that case was very interesting for me because it was evolving as I was writing it, but also because it hinted at all of these other elements, this synchronicity, this kind of, are the spirits somehow connecting people aspect to it, which I touch upon in the book, but you don't want to get too heavy because you don't want it to be off of the subject.
I think it's pretty interesting how you can both have the same book, yet neither one of you can have our banner.
Yeah. Yeah, that is,
well,
for me, the most profound story, each story as you're writing it, it kind of has like a little bit of a wow factor to it, especially when you start to scratch your head at what could be the cause behind some of these. I thought, for example, Claire the Doll was a really intriguing story from the fact that you don't know exactly what the nature of the haunting is of that and how it all began. But I think Jeanette's story that she shared with us about the Haitian masks, and just in terms of the amount of malevolence associated with those objects, she bought these Haitian masks to put into her house. She had her dream house, and she always wanted to have actual legitimate Haitian masks hang on her wall, so she bought these from Port-au-Prince and had them shipped to her house. And so many bad things happened from the first moment, from the time her husband went to pick them up at the post office and his brakes went out on his car. And then, glasses would shatter as people were in the same room as the masks. The dog wouldn't walk by them. So many creepy things about them. And then all of a sudden, holes started appearing mysteriously throughout her entire property. Like really, really deep holes that, nobody could have dug them without them catching them out there doing it.
were there like over 1,000 of them, like in Blanket, Lancashire?
No, not that many. But there were still enough to be concerned. And it wasn't just a day in the life, it was every day they were going out there and finding these things. And she realized that her family was in serious danger by these masks. And that's pretty interesting in and of itself. But then how she got rid of them is even more intriguing, because she contacted John Zaffis, and he had said, if you can't get rid of whatever's haunting them, send them to me. And so she actually went through the process of having them sent to him, and they disappeared from the post office. They dropped them off at the post office, and they never made it to John Zaffis.
They never made it to John Zaffis.
They would have been nice in my museum, buddy.
Yeah, right above the haunted couch.
Wow.
Well then. And that's one of the things that people were asking us while we were in the process of writing this. Oh, well, you're going to go down to John Zaffis' house and interview him, right? And that's something that we had talked about originally, is I was going to drive down to Zaffis' house and talk to him and spend the day with him and look around at some of the items. But two things started to come clear as we were writing this book. One, John Zaffis is working on his own book about his collection.
Right.
So therefore, he wasn't going to talk to us about it. And two, and I would say that he wouldn't talk to us, but we decided not to ask.
Right.
Because we didn't want to put him in an awkward position of having to say no. And two, it really wasn't about that. It wasn't about the guy who has all these objects sharing the stories of how he collected them. It was about the people who experienced them sharing with us what they went through.
All walks of life and society, and yeah.
And the story, I mean, I put out the call on social media for people to get in touch with me, and to have people that I went to high school with writing back and telling people who never believed in this stuff. You know, I don't believe in that kind of stuff, but I had an experience with an object, and to have them sharing with me, you know, what happened to them. I started to realize that, yeah, you know, there's, as much as we say the paranormal is everywhere, you know, it seems like almost every person encounters that one object that isn't quite right in their life.
Did you ever find anybody who had an object that wasn't a problem if they just ignored it and left it alone? Or did objects seem to want attention even if you did leave them alone?
Well, I mean, Chris, you chronicled a few stories where as much as they tried to leave them alone, they couldn't.
Right, and I think that for the most part, the same kind of compulsion for whatever was with it to begin with, whatever kind of drove, whether it was an earthly spirit, whether it was, you know, a person who was actually once alive, or whether it was something darker or something, you know, not as clear. I think that same thing kind of intensified most times when the people chose to ignore it. So a lot of the haunted items, especially that I covered, had definitely an escalation to the story. And so it was one of those situations where people were kind of feeling like, no, this isn't happening, or there was that confusion I was talking about, and they were trying to, you know, pass off, because to believe that an item, so many of them were not people who were into ghosts, so were not people who thought this stuff even existed. So to admit that this thing was kind of happening to them, they kept pushing it off, and once again, that birth certificate story is a great example of, you know, the spirit went from kind of gently tapping them on the shoulder to literally shaking them awake at night and smacking them and yelling at them to do something about it.
Well, Chris, one of the things that you were discussing with me off the air earlier was the fact that we wrote in the book, of course, about the proliferation of haunted items on eBay over the last few years, and how you can kind of follow the trends.
I've bought and given them as gifts to people over the years, yeah.
And you paid a premium for the name, for having that description as haunted. But you can kind of follow what the trends are in the paranormal by what's on eBay. You know, when we started doing this book, it's a ghost, and then at some point it became a demon, and now the popular thing is that it's a djinn.
Yeah.
You know, so you can follow along with those. But you actually were telling me about a story that came out this week about eBay cracking down, not on haunted items necessarily, but on certain paranormal services.
Well, I think it's you know, potentially as a slippery slope, because, you know, that's in terms of what they do. They have to watch out for frauds, and they've got to watch out for legality and for people, things coming back on them. But this week at least, they came out, and they will no longer allow what they call, and I'm quoting here, prohibited items include advice about the paranormal, spells, curses, hexing, objects that allow you to cast spells or curses or hexing, anything that helps you conjure or control magic, blessing services and prayers, which kind of gets more into the religious side of things.
I was going to say, all those things are religious in nature anyway, so they wouldn't be able to sell rosary beads then under that type
and I think that's what kind of it opens up to, because, these are many things that fall under their metaphysical category. But one could say, those little guardian angels that you're supposed to give people when they go in for surgery and things like that, those are blessings in and of themselves. Can those no longer be sold? And I think that they seem to be, the focus seems to be things that you give to someone that can then be used to do these things, as opposed to haunted items. But, it's not that far down the slope to say that, well, you can no longer sell all those gin items, or you can no longer sell the little box that you trap the ghost in. So it's interesting that eBay is making that distinction.
So bonded items are still okay.
Bonded items, as of right now, are still okay. Yeah, as a matter of fact, they even come out and they say, crystal healing skulls, finger rings, enchanted by genies. Those things are still allowed, and not to mention all of the paranormal equipment that they allow to be sold.
Well, the paranormal equipment, I can't imagine they could. I mean, a good portion of it is not specifically for the paranormal field anyway. It's only the last few years we've seen devices that are created just for paranormal use. So, I mean, it'd be kind of hard to not allow people to sell a tri-field EMF meter because it has other applications.
Well, sure. And I think that if you get into other things such as dowsing rods, if you're really into finding water, but you can
get those $450 ones that's linked up to the story.
Right. They and of course what your previous guests were talking about, Ouija boards. Those are all things that are right now safe, but may not be safe down the road.
Okay, so how about stuff like accumulators and stuff? If you go back to like Wilhelm Reich stuff or cloud busters, that doesn't really fall under a religious thing, but it's still a
kind of faith-based, kind of
in a certain sense, you got to believe in what Reich had talked about, orgone energy and stuff like that. It is not anything dealing with a quote-unquote deity or a faith that would normally be practiced by other people, but it's a faith in that this particular energy or whatever field exists.
I think people at eBay would be confused.
They don't really know.
Yeah, whatever. Let him sell it because I don't understand what he's talking about.
I don't want him to go down that slippery slope, though, because I don't want him to do anything that ruins my plan of eventually someday when I have money, when I get the coast-to-coast gig or something and I actually have some extra scratch, of starting my collection of items with religious figures appearing randomly in them, like the moldy grilled cheese that looks like Jesus or the burnt toast that looks like Mary. I'm hoping to have that collection someday, and I'm counting on eBay to provide it for me.
Well, I'm interested as to how eBay is making that distinction. You know what I'm saying? Like, well, this item is doing what we don't want it to do, but this item is not. And how easily it is to change maybe a few keywords in what you're selling to completely make it, oh, no, it's allowable now. It's not a, I'm not telling them how to do a curse. I'm telling them how to find inner peace by doing bad things to others. That's a healing thing, so I'm allowed to do that.
We could ask them these questions, but, eBay didn't respond to any of our requests for interviews for the book Haunted Objects, so.
No, they did not. People on eBay did, and then you back down as if they were hiding something. But eBay themselves did not respond.
Right. It was really kind of a tough process to get some of the larger entities to comment on this.
It ended up when you took out the Zappos aspect of it, we didn't spend too much time. And the eBay stuff. If you originally looked at our proposal, it was so much more heavy with that kind of thing. And then as the book got closer towards, being due, the publishers seemed to care less about that, which was good for us because we did want to focus more on the people as opposed to the institution.
And we're getting some comments in the chat room, and I just noticed that that low battery Dave said he will smack anyone who thinks a scanning radio will talk to spirits. And I would agree with you, Dave, except that I've had some pretty strange things happen with those things.
Yeah.
So we'll convince him. We'll convince him that it's at least possible.
No, I kind of scoff the cell phone to the dead, but I've had a few moments where it's like, whoa, that was a little too strange.
Right. But that doesn't mean that it's a spirit necessarily. It could just be something else messing with us.
Yeah, it's true.
So now, Chris, I haven't heard anything from the. Actually, I've heard nothing from the publisher over the last few weeks, but surprisingly silent publisher. And I noticed that we're not in any of the catalogs. But anyway, we are the bastard children of the publisher, I guess. But I mean, would you have interest in a sequel if the possibility came up?
Body Bags 2.
ABC News covers the world. WBSM covers your neighborhood. AM 1420. WBSM.
Glad we got that out of the way.
I think that about says it all right there.
Right. I mean, here's what's going to happen though: is we're going to have a lot of these stories flooding into us once the book starts to become more popular, and people are going to be sharing their stories with us. But I think it would lose the charm that we've had with the first one. It would lose that freshness.
When I start out every book being like, I want a question for me answered, or I want to explore a question, and I had people approach me and. Schiffer, for example, and other publishers wanting to do sequels to Dark Woods, wanting to do sequels to Ghosts of Bridgewater Triangle, and I could write those books because I've gotten enough information from it, and the attention to those areas is so much more intense now than it was then. But I'm kind of like, no, that's not where I am right now, and so I know that sounds very artsy-fartsy to say that, but I'm not really sure. I'm really enjoying talking about the haunted objects and a lot of the ideas behind them. But I'm not really sure I would want to go back there again and kind of, okay, now haunted items too, haunted objects too.
You know what though? Just send us your stories anyway, and we'll decide what to do with them. We can always make some sort of online repository.
So much, yeah, and I think that'd be really cool, and we could add that to kind of the Ghosts on Your Shelf part of my site that is meant to promote the book, but also I would love for it to be and then do cross stuff with Spooky Southcoast on it to be that kind of collection of really good haunted object stories.
Sounds good. All right, well,
a little virtual museum.
All right, thank you for joining us to discuss this, and you'll be taking over the reins next week on Spooky TV only, and we'll be at Lizzie Borden's, so we'll be anxiously awaiting the recorded version of that. So we'll be back ourselves in 2 weeks here in the studio. Until then, stay spooktacular.